All right, so this is gonna be fun. This is called Every Impeachment in American History. I don't really know that many. I think I do. I think obviously you got Donald Trump. I think, and by the way, impeachments are twofold. One, there's the call for impeachment, and two, there's the actual impeachment that's happened. I think there's some holes there in my ideas with what that means, but Mr. Beast's gonna fill those holes for sure. And I don't know. I like off the top of my head, I really don't know. I'm gonna say Trump, Clinton, Buchanan, Nixon. I don't know whoever else would be the right answer, but let's just see what we got.
Who's impeached? I'm Mr. Beats. In this video, impeached, you say? Yeah? Who's impeached? Are you mocking me? No, I really want to know. Who has been impeached? Oh, well, this video is about every impeachment in American history. All of them, or just the presidents? All of them.
Wait. You can be impeached if you're not the president? I mean, that makes perfect practical sense, but nothing that's common knowledge, I would say. Now, if you're in that niche, you're like, duh, but like, interesting.
First of all, let's define what impeachment means.
We need to know.
Well, here's what it's not. Impeachment does not mean kicking someone out of office. I repeat, impeachment does not mean kicking someone out of public office.
I think that's, I know that's not true myself, but I think that might be like a big misnomer to the public.
Impeachment, in a general sense, just means charging someone in public office of wrongdoing. Today, in the United States, it basically just means charging someone in public office with a crime, not convicting them. Remember, Americans, you are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, okay? According to Article 2, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, quote, "The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors."
Or other high crimes and misdemeanors. That seems so open-ended, though.
It's worth noting that, quote, high crimes and misdemeanors is up for interpretation.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, and while impeachment may happen at the state level, in this video we're just going to focus on every impeachment in American history at the federal level. Good. According to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5 of the Constitution, the U.S. House of Representatives are the only ones who have the power to impeach. First, a U.S. representative must introduce an impeachment resolution. Any member of the House of Representatives may do this against any federal public official, not just the president, vice president, members of the cabinet, and other federal officials in the executive branch.
But I'm guessing the Supreme Court and the two branches of the House.
But also judges and even members of Congress. The resolution is then referred to a committee, usually the House Judiciary Committee, which investigates the charges against the public official and
what if you're on the Judiciary Committee and you're impeached?
Decides whether or not to recommend articles of impeachment. If they do recommend it, it goes to the entire House of Representatives for a vote. If a majority of the House votes in favor of any of the articles of impeachment, that official is impeached. But the party's just getting started, Joseph.
Who's Joseph?
By the way, I'm sorry if your name isn't Joseph. The process then moves to the United States Senate, which holds a freaking trial to determine whether or not the impeached official is guilty of the crime. The Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court presides over the whole dang thing, while U.S. senators act as both jurors and judges.
Wow.
Some of the members of the U.S. House manage the whole thing as prosecutors, presenting evidence against the impeached official and arguing the case for their removal. The official being impeached and their lawyers may also present a defense, of course. When the trial is all over, a 2/3 majority of the Senate is required to convict and remove the public official from office. If the official is convicted, not only are they kicked out of office, but they may also be forbidden from holding any future federal office.
So let's get this straight. So impeachment resolution is brought to the table. The committee is then debates the said resolution and then votes. If that vote passes, that it goes to the House. Same process. They debate, majority goes to an impeachment trial. Once the trial has concluded, then you acquit or you convict. And then the conviction would then give said individual a potential ban and, of course, then a removal.
So here is every impeachment in American history. What? Oh, the sponsor? The sponsor. This video is sponsored again by Morgan & Morgan.
W. Morgan & Morgan.
Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring the American history.
All right, here we go.
The first American to be impeached was the only member of Congress to ever be impeached. William Blount.
I don't know about you.
A U.S. Senator from Tennessee got impeached on July 7th, 1797 for
Over 200 years ago.
conspiring to help the British seize the Spanish-controlled territories of Louisiana and
Bruh, what you do?
Florida. Blount had hoped doing that would boost land prices so he could have a way to pay off his debts. While the members of the Senate did vote to expel him, they ultimately decided they didn't have the authority to convict him and dismissed the charges. Next up was John Pickering, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of New Hampshire. The House impeached him on March 2nd, 1803 on charges of drunkenness and, quote,
unlawful rulings.
whatever that means, am I right? The Senate found him guilty. Pickering was the first judge to be impeached and the first person in American history convicted and removed from office in an impeachment trial.
That's an interesting one. It seems so minute.
On the exact same day that the Senate kicked Pickering out, the House of Representatives impeached its first and only Supreme Court justice. And the charges were kind of
The same?
ridiculous.
Oh.
On March 12, 1804, the House impeached Justice Samuel Chase for being biased in his judicial rulings. I'm not joking. I mean, there were actually 8 specific articles of impeachment, but that's what all
If you want to read. I'm just going to take Mr. Beat's words.
of them pretty much came down to. 3 of them were about supposed procedural errors. One was for saying offensive stuff. While the House tried to cancel Chase for what seemed to be purely political reasons, the Senate found him not guilty of all charges.
That's good. At least we have some checks and balances.
Chase remains the only Supreme Court justice to ever be impeached. It'd be 25 years before the next impeachment. On April 24th, 1830, the House impeached this dude, James Peck, for abusing his power in bankruptcy cases. Peck, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of Missouri, had put another dude named Luke Lawless in jail for
Dang, that's a crazy name, and then you get jailed.
writing a letter in a local newspaper talking trash about him. Well, after that, Lawless used the law and made it his life's mission to take Peck down. And he apparently was a big reason for Peck's eventual impeachment. However, the Senate found Peck not guilty by just 1 vote. Next up was another judge, and this one was more understandable. On May 19th, 1862,
Gotta be something to do with the Civil War and treason.
the House impeached West Humphreys, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, for basically just supporting the Confederacy during the American Civil War, man. The articles of impeachment included charges of publicly calling for secession, giving aid to an armed rebellion, conspiring with the Confederate President Jefferson Davis, acting as a judge for the Confederacy, imprisoning a Union sympathizer, and stealing property from Supreme Court Justice John Catron and Tennessee Governor Andrew Johnson.
Crazy. Andrew Johnson, of course, for future president. But it's crazy because obviously Tennessee does become part of the Confederacy. So this is just like, it's in one of those like middle grounds where you got caught up supporting the state that you're in, and the federal government threw the book at you.
Supreme Court Justice John Catron and Tennessee Governor Andrew Johnson. Jeez, dude. Holy moly. The Senate unanimously convicted Humphreys of all charges except one, kicked him out of office, and prohibited him from holding office for the United States for the rest of his life. Yeah, he became a Confederate judge.
I knew that was going to happen. Like, that was... But he's only going to be a Confederate judge for a few years, obviously.
After that, and the one charge that Humphreys avoided was the one where he was accused of stealing Andrew Johnson's property, because I guess no one liked Andrew Johnson. Hey, speaking of Andrew Johnson, he was the next American impeached. On February 22nd, 1868, Andrew Johnson was...
Yeah, I don't know why I said Buchanan. I was thinking of Johnson when I was saying Buchanan. Buchanan's just a bad president, but Johnson was impeached.
Was now president of these here United States and became the first president impeached. Yay! The House, made up of a bunch of radical Republicans who hated his guts, impeached him for violating a law called the Tenure of Office Act. A law, you could argue, that the House helped pass because they knew Johnson would break it. Anyway, the law said President Johnson had to get the U.S. Senate's permission before he fired any executive officer whom a president had appointed. Well, Johnson didn't get the Senate's permission before he fired the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton. Oops. The House presented 11 articles of impeachment against him. But I'm not going to get into all of them, okay? Long story short, the Senate voted against convicting Johnson, and he stayed in office. He didn't get kicked out of office by one freaking vote.
That's crazy.
Edmund Ross, a senator from Kansas, cast the single deciding vote, and it took everyone by surprise because he apparently had changed his mind. Why did he change his mind? Well, no one knows for sure, but some say he may have been bribed. Don't you just love politics?
Well, that's always been a thing.
The next impeachment came for this dude, Mark Dillahey, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas. He suffered from alcoholism, but not the high-functioning kind. On February 28, 1873, the House impeached him on charges of drunkenness while on the bench.
Dang.
During the trial, Robert Crozier, another senator from Kansas, testified, quote, "I am compelled to say that Judge Dillahey frequently becomes inebriated. I have seen him in that condition very frequently off the bench and several times on it."
Damn.
However, his impeachment never reached the Senate because he resigned.
And that happens a few times. I know that's got to happen in the future when we get to some individuals.
Before then. Next up was the only cabinet member to be impeached in American history. The House impeached William Belknap, the U.S. Secretary of War under President Ulysses Grant, on March 1st, 1876, on charges of corruption related to his sale of military trading post positions. More specifically, they said he accepted about $400,000 worth.
And that happened a lot. Selling positions away.
The bribes in today's money. This became known as the Trader Joe's scandal. The Trader Post scandal. However, Belknap resigned before the Senate started his impeachment trial. Regardless, the Senate didn't have the 2/3 majority of votes needed to find him guilty. Belknap never got in trouble for those bribes. For the next 123 years, only federal judges got impeached. 8 of them, to be precise. The House impeached Charles Swain, a judge for the U.S. District for the Northern District of Florida, on December 13th, 1904, on charges of corruption. There were 12 articles of impeachment, including accepting gifts and payments from lawyers, fraud, living outside of his...
That seems weird. Living outside his district. Is that so petty?
District, improperly influencing a grand jury, and the, quote, improper use of private railroad cars.
What was he doing in the railroad cars?
Even though Swain's own lawyers admitted that he was guilty of some of that stuff at the trial, the Senate ultimately just said he was not guilty on all charges. Lucky Swain. The House impeached Robert Archibald, a judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, on July 13th, 1912, on charges of corruption and,
Seems like this is a recurrent theme, corruption.
general misconduct. There were 13 articles of impeachment, including using his position to make money in both the railroad industry and in real estate. The Senate voted to convict him on 4 of the charges, and he was kicked out of office and forbidden from ever holding public office again. Despite this, Archibald never admitted to any wrongdoing for the rest of his life. The House impeached George English, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Illinois, on April 1st, 1926, also on charges of corruption. There were 5 articles of impeachment, including charges of playing favorites in bankruptcy court with his son. The Senate ended up dismissing his impeachment charges after English resigned from office. The House impeached Harold Louderback, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, on February 24th, 1933, also on charges of corruption. There were 4 articles of impeachment, including charges of improperly influencing a grand jury and one-sided communications during trials. However, apparently not many senators even showed up for Louderback's impeachment trial, and the Senate didn't have the 2/3 majority of votes needed to find him guilty. The House impeached Halstead Ritter, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida, on March 2nd, 1936, on charges of general misconduct.
Seems like that's another one, corruption and misconduct.
There were 7 articles of impeachment, including charges of interfering with a grand jury, playing favorites, and tax evasion.
That's a big
The Senate found him not guilty on all charges, except one. They found him guilty of, quote, bringing his courts into disrepute to the prejudice of said court and public confidence in the administration of justice, and to the prejudice of public respect for and confidence in the federal judiciary. Okay, so I couldn't figure out what that actually meant, but regardless, the Senate voted to kick him out of office.
Yeah, like I'm hearing you read that. I'm like, is this Latin?
With an exact 2/3 majority vote. Thanks to perhaps the New Deal coalition, it'd be another 50 years before the next impeachment. The next impeachment came on March 16th, 1986, against an infamous dude who once was a lawyer for...
By the way, I see how we skipped over 72. I believe Nixon was going to possibly be impeached, but he resigned. So he did not have to go through that.
Entertainers like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Harry Claiborne. In 1986, he was chief judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Nevada. The House impeached him on charges of tax evasion and filing false income tax returns.
So he probably spent a lot of time in Vegas.
The House voted overwhelmingly to impeach him. It was 406-0. The first of only 2 unanimous impeachments.
The first of only 2, there's another one.
In American history. It was unanimous because, well, he had already been convicted for tax evasion and had even served 17 months in prison. There were 4 articles of impeachment against him, all dealing with him avoiding paying taxes. In trial, none of the evidence against Claiborne was surprising, since he'd already been on trial and served hard time. This was the first impeachment trial in which a special committee gathered evidence instead of
Is that Al Gore?
The full Senate, which was controversial, to say the least. Regardless, the Senate found him guilty and removed him from office. Next up was this dude, Alcee Hastings, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Oof! The Southern District of Florida again? Not a good look there, Southern Florida. The House impeached Hastings on August 3rd, 1988, with 17 articles of impeachment against him. Congratulations, Alcee. That's the most impeachment articles given to one person in American history. Anyway, it was not surprising that there were so many articles of impeachment against him, as he'd already been in trial after being accused of trying to take bribes. That said, the jury found him not guilty in that trial. Regardless, the House still impeached him on charges of perjury, which means lying under oath, and conspiring to accept a bribe. The Senate found him guilty on 8 of the 17 articles of impeachment and removed him from office. However, they didn't prohibit him from ever serving in public office again, and 4 years later, Florida residents elected him to the U.S. House of Representatives, and
How does that work then?
he served as a representative right up until his death in 2021. The House impeached Walter Nixon, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the...
Wait, if you were impeached though, why are you able to serve as a representative? I don't understand that one.
The House impeached Walter Nixon, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi, on May 10th, 1989, on charges of perjury before a grand jury. Now, Nixon had also already been convicted of perjury and even sentenced to 5 years in prison, so this was a no-brainer for both the House and the Senate. The Senate found him guilty and removed him from office. That said, Nixon later appealed his impeachment to the Supreme Court in a case known as Nixon v. United States, not to be confused with United States v. Nixon.
Might have to do these videos sometime.
Why? Anyway, long story short, Walter Nixon lost his appeal. Next up was our next president. Woohoo! Bill Clinton was the second president in American history impeached. The House impeached him on December 19th, 1998 with 2 articles of impeachment, one charge of perjury and another for obstruction of justice, both related to his affair with White House intern Monica Lewinsky.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Well, he did, but it didn't matter. The Senate found him not guilty on both charges.
That's crazy. That's crazy right there. Why did they not? Was it House major? So was the Senate majority? Was the Senate majority Democrat at the time? Why didn't they? Did they care more about the balance of what would happen after the fact? Very confused there. It was so obvious.
Oh, by the way, Alcee Hastings, the former judge and now congressman that I mentioned earlier, voted against Clinton's impeachment in the House.
So
I want to thank Congressman Alcee Hastings.
Next up was Samuel Kent, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. On June 19th, 2009,
we're getting closer to 2025.
The House impeached him on charges of sexual assault and obstruction of justice. However, by that time, he was already in prison after being found guilty for lying to investigators about sexually abusing 2 employees. At first, Kent tried to, quote, retire to collect his pension benefits, which is why the House was like, nuh-uh, buddy. Ultimately, the impeachment trial wasn't carried out after Kent finally resigned. The House impeached Thomas Porteous, a judge for the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana, on March 11th, 2010. This was the second of only 2 unanimous impeachments in American history, and also the most lopsided. Of the 4 articles of impeachment against Porteous, all of them were unanimous, and one was passed with a vote of 423 to 0. The charges were generally perjury and corruption. Basically, he hid his wealth and then later lied about it under oath.
This is 2010, so is this like after like the 2008 financial crisis and within that like mess, or is that something completely different?
Both. The Senate overwhelmingly found him guilty and removed him from office and prohibited him from serving in public office ever again.
Wow.
And lastly, one more person who you may have heard of. Donald Trump is not only the only president, but
Twice.
the only person in American history to be impeached twice. He was also the 3rd president to be impeached. On September 24th, 2019, the House impeached him on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress related to his actions pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rival, the now President Joe Biden. The Senate found Trump not guilty of both charges.
They're vicious and mean, vicious. These people are vicious. Adam Schiff is a vicious, horrible person. Nancy Pelosi is a horrible person. And she wanted to impeach a long time ago.
On January 13th, 2021, the House impeached him again, this time on charges of incitement of insurrection, after many accused him of riling up the mob.
That's what date? It's only a week before his presidency ended, too.
Of incitement of insurrection, after many accused him of riling up the mob that stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, trying to prevent the certification of electoral votes. Things moved a lot quicker with that second impeachment. By the time the trial started, Trump was already out of office, but they carried on anyway. However, again, the Senate didn't have the 2/3 majority of votes needed to find him guilty.
And we say bye-bye.
So there you have it, Jessica.
Yeah, you'd have to, yeah, that's a difficult one. The second one's very difficult. I think the first one's a quid pro quo one, though.
There was every impeachment in American history. And I'm sorry if your name's not Jessica. To sum it all up, a total of 20 federal officials have been impeached in American history. 15 federal judges, 3 presidents, 1 member of Congress, and 1 cabinet member. However, just 8 of the 20 impeached were actually convicted and removed from office, and all 8 of them were...
Yeah, but Elsie Hastings one, who cares? He got right back into the public office. So this system's corrupt. You think American politics is corrupt? No way.
were judges. Oh, and all of them were men. Before I end this...
Well, that's not saying anything, given that 99% of every public office in the United States history has been a man.
This video, I should mention 2 things. First, I didn't bring up the 20 members of Congress who have been expelled. The expulsion process is entirely separate from the impeachment process. Second, I also didn't bring up all of the impeachment investigations. In other words, I didn't bring up all of the public officials who have almost been impeached. While it's difficult to know exactly how many impeachment investigations there have been in American history, according to my calculations, there have been at least 78 impeachment investigations that didn't result in an actual impeachment. Yep, Richard Nixon was one of them. And if you're watching this video as a member of the United States federal government, you better watch out, because your butt might be impeached next. Heck, all of you might be. Listen to you.
All right, cool. TLDR to this whole thing. Seems like it's a very muddy process of impeachment. You obviously need your cards. It's very political, obviously, as well. Like you're gonna need a stacked Congress, or it's just gonna have to be so obvious. If you're a president, say, you would really have to have the odds stacked against you. Like, give it as it may. In 2021, Trump was pretty screwed in 2021. Like, after January 6th and the impeachment that followed, he was pretty screwed. It's kind of crazy that he didn't get impeached. It's kind of crazy he didn't get impeached. But that's what you have to have an overwhelming, like, you have to have 2/3 majority, obviously. You have to, and then that wouldn't even be the impeachment. That would just make you go to trial, and then the trial would have to convict you. Curious to say, if anyone's into modern politics and so forth, what do you guys think? Like, and specifically honing into the Trump one, if Trump was to be impeached in terms of the Senate, would it have amounted to anything, do you think? Do you think it would actually have gone to trial? Would it have gone to trial? And if it did go to trial, would it have been more likely than not that he would be convicted? Interesting stuff. I appreciate you guys as always. Leave me some video suggestions down below. And peace out. Bye-bye.